Come on, lean in, and let's have another uncomfortable conversation with courage and confidence so that we can gain clarity. I am Dr. Regina Lynn, your clarity advocate, here to have candid discussions, provide real guidance as we address topics most people avoid, but they cannot afford to ignore. Welcome back to another uncomfortable conversation. On the last episode, we talked about understanding why you are stuck. And in this episode, we're going to discuss one of the primary tools you need to get unstuck. We're talking about boundaries and the guilt that has been weaponized against you every single time you try to set one. Somewhere along the way, and I want you to really think about it, think back. There has been a place where a specific moment someone has convinced you or me that having boundaries makes us cold, makes us selfish, makes us difficult to love or difficult to work with or deal with. Maybe it was a parent who said, after everything I've done for you. Maybe it was a partner who said, you are so sensitive. Maybe it was a coworker or a supervisor who said, I thought that you were a team player. Maybe it was the culture you grew up in, a faith-based community that equated self-sacrifice as virtue, a family system that ran on self-assassination and called it love. Wherever it came from, I need you to hear it and hear clearly today. That was a lie. A boundary is not a weapon. A boundary is not punishment. A boundary is the most honest thing you can offer another person. And today, we're going to dismantle the lie piece by piece. Now, why are women socialized to feel guilty for having boundaries? Let's be honest about who this episode is for, because data and experiences both point in one direction. Women, and particularly black women, women of color. Women are raised in collective communities. They are socialized to be caretakers first and people second. From childhood, girls are taught to be agreeable, accommodating, helpful, and nice. While on the other hand, boys are taught to be assertive, direct, and to ask for exactly what they want. And here is the result. When a man says no, it seems to be as confident. When a woman says no, it seems to be cold or difficult. The exact same behavior, however, completely different social consequences. That is not a personality difference. That is a conditioning difference. And within that conditioning, the word selfish becomes a weapon. Anytime you try to prioritize your own needs, your own time, your own energy, someone somewhere has probably either said outright or implied you are being selfish. And because that word feels like an accusation of bad character, it works. It shuts you down. It sends you back into people pleasing mode before you even finish your sentence. I want to reclaim that word today. Self-care is not selfish. Self-preservation is not selfish. Knowing your boundaries is not selfish. In fact, I would argue that giving endlessly from an empty tank is one of the least generous things that you can do. Because what people eventually get from you is resentment, burnout, and a hollow version of yourself. And that serves no one, to include you. Let's discuss the difference between boundaries and punishment. I want to make a very clear distinction because this is where people get it confused. A boundary is about you. A punishment is about them. When you say, I'm not available after 8 p.m. for work calls, that is a boundary. It's about your energy, your family time, your recovery. It is not about the other person. When I say I'm not picking up your calls anymore because you never listen to me and you only call me when you need something, That may very well be true. And you may have every right to feel that way. But that is a response to a perceived wrongdoing. That is a consequence. And there's nothing wrong with consequences. But let's be clear about what we're working with. Most healthy boundaries are not reactive. They are proactive. They are set before the overflow point, not after. They are communicated calmly, not in the heat of an argument. And they are consistent, and they don't depend on your mood or how much the other person pleases you that particular day. A boundary says, this is what works for me. Full stop. No apologies. No lengthy explanation. No permission is required. Now, how to communicate a boundary clearly and kindly. Let's talk about it for a minute, because a lot of people know they need boundaries. However, they just don't know how to put one into words without either sounding harsh or without immediately apologizing for it the moment it leaves their mouth. The formula I like to use is quite simple. State it, name it, hold it. State the boundary clearly and briefly. I'm not able to take on any additional projects right now. You don't need to explain your schedule, your workload, your home situation, or justify yourself in any way. One clear sentence is all that is needed. Name the alternative if there is one. If something urgent comes up, let's revisit this next month. Or simply, I won't be able to do this one. You're acknowledging the reality without drowning in justification. Hold it. This is the hard part, because the other person may push back. They may express disappointment. They may go quiet. And everything in you, every conditioned nerve will want to fill that silence with a reaction. Don't. Let the boundary stand. But what should you do when someone pushes back? Let's talk about the pushback, because it is coming. And I want you to be prepared for it. When you start setting boundaries, especially if you've never done it before in a particular relationship, people will react. Some will be surprised, some will be hurt, some will be angry, and some of them will test it repeatedly to see if you mean it. This is not because they are necessarily bad people. It is because you've trained them over time to expect access, and now you're changing the rules. Change requires adjustment. Here's what you need to know. Their discomfort does not mean you did something wrong. It means you did something new. Those are two very different things. When people push back, you do not need to defend, debate, or over-explain. A simple, calm, repeating your boundaries is what is required. For example, I understand this is frustrating. I am still not able to do that. That's it. You can say it as many times as you need. It's called the broken record technique. And it works because you're not escalating. You're not withdrawing. You're just calmly, consistently holding the line. Now, if someone repeatedly refuses to respect your boundaries, that is data. And data is important about the relationship, about the dynamic, about what needs to change. Pay attention to it. Let me give you some language. I'm going to give you a couple of scenarios, actual words that you can use. Sometimes you know the theory, but you freeze when that moment comes. So let's talk about when it's family. You can say, I love you, and I am not in the space to discuss this topic right now. Can we talk about something else? Or, I've decided not to lend money within the family. It's a decision I'm holding for my own financial health, and it applies across the board. Let's discuss some words that you can use when you're talking to friends. I care about you, and I'm going to be honest. I do not have the emotional bandwidth for this conversation today. Can we schedule a time when I can really show up for you? And let's talk about when we're in the workplace, either a coworker or a supervisor. You can say something like, my plate is at capacity right now. If this is a priority, we can talk about what I be removing from my current list to make room for this particular task. This one is particularly effective because it puts the trade-off back into their hands without you simply absorbing more work or more tasks. Now, let's talk about that self-talk. You can say, I'm not available to people who consistently drain me. I am not available to guilt that doesn't belong to me. I am not available to my own self-abandonment, because sometimes the most important limit is the one you set for yourself. You are allowed to take up space. You are allowed to say what you need. You are allowed to protect your own energy. That is not a bad person. That is a whole person. Let's pause and reflect for a moment. Ask yourself this question. Where in my life am I saying yes when I mean no? Be specific. Name the relationship, the situation, the reoccurring task. What is the cost of that yes? And what will it take to give that situation an honest answer? I want to say this one more time before we close, because some of you need to hear it more than once. Setting a boundary does not make you difficult. It makes you honest. And honesty, real, clear, and grounded honesty, is one of the most loving things you can bring to any relationship, including the relationship with yourself. The most generous version of you is the version that knows boundaries and respects them, because that version has something real to give. This has been another uncomfortable conversation, and we are just getting started. Until next time, I want you to straighten your crown, hug yourself, love like you've never been hurt before. Peace.